I think this is what I'm really concerned about. I'm concerned that people who don't know anything about Jesus watch Christians argue with each other and are turned away from the gospel. That young people who watch their parents' behavior online and they see them not being known by their love, but by their politics or their passion for some issue. Now, Jesus, you say, but Jesus rebuked the Pharisees. He did rebuke them, but often he didn't start those battles. He answered questions back and forth because he was put on the spot. It wasn't like he woke up every day seeking out Pharisees to blow up. Right?
Yeah.
So if after you post, you find people are direct messaging you saying, wow, there's something in you that's attractive to me, I need you to pray healing onto my life. That was the style in which Jesus turned the tables over. It was not done in vengeance.
Or in a hunt. He wasn't going to snipe Pharisees, you know what I mean? Where he's like, well, they're in the middle of lunch. He's like, hold on, I heard. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Allison Park Leadership Podcast. It's been a little while, but we're glad to be back with you. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Dave.
And my name's Jeff, and we were in a good rhythm every other week for a while. Then we started doing once a week, and then, things slowed down, vacations. I had a minor surgery on my nose, but we are now back and ready to get into some rhythms again. So thanks for joining us.
Pastor Jeff, the plastic surgery looks great on you. Your nose is so different. No, I think it was a breathing thing, right?
Yeah, it was deviated septum, right? So I can breathe now. So maybe I'll sound better on this podcast.
You sound great. So today's topic, we were having a conversation about what we were going to talk about. One of the things that is just so prevalent right now in the middle of all the tension and emotions and all the stakes, politically and with the coronavirus pandemic and, with churches, whatever else, with families, is the reactions on social media. So we were initially kind of talking about this idea of how to post like a Christian, or how to build relationships with someone that's different than me or that has a different perspective. But generally we try to stay away from how-tos in this podcast. I think it's a little less deep than we want to go. So we were trying to dig out the why. And so really the heart of this, do you want to explain sort of what the why question is?
Yeah. So again, we do this podcast primarily. We want to talk to the leaders and the staff at Allison Park Church, but anybody else that wants to listen in on this is welcome to. So we're saying why we refuse to be reactive to the tension of the day on social media. So you wanted to use the word why I choose to share my raw emotions. And I guess
choose not to.
Right. So I guess we're going to get into the difference between those things, but let's just set the stage. I mean, this is unprecedented at times. Again, unprecedented is overused in this particular era. I saw a little mug someone posted on there. I long for precedented times, and that's definitely true. So we live in these times where everything's a battle. I mean, you have differences of opinion on every aspect of the medical responses to the coronavirus. Are masks helpful or are they not? Is hydroxychloroquine a cure or is it not? Right? Is the death toll inflated or is it not? Is this pandemic as severe or is it not? Mm-hmm. Is this just a whole political thing? And then you have the conspiracy theories that go way down the road about other things. Okay,
is this just a bunch of corruption where powerful people are taking advantage, or is this an oppression on the church?
Yeah, right. So and there's strong, passionate opinions on both sides of that. And then there's the other things. There's the political aspects of things, and then there's the racial tensions, and so this has been an emotional time. I mean, so much fear, so much anger, so much anxiety, so much frustration, and there's limitations on what we can do and where we can go and how we can go there and how we can gather, and depending upon what state you are and how often the rules change. And so with every new thing that comes up, there's a new wave of frustration, and it's like people are saying, I just can't take this anymore. And because we now have this thing that we call social media, before social media arrived, where now everybody's on these platforms, you may have thought these things but you didn't have a platform to tell the whole world what you were thinking. So in like 1918, during the Spanish flu pandemic, there may have been a lot of conspiracy theories then too, but no one had the opportunity to sit down at their dinner table and pull out a device and tell the whole world, something that's going to go viral. So we all have a great opportunity in that we can instantly have voice to the world because of these social media platforms. But we also with that have a responsibility to behave ourselves in a certain way, especially if you call yourself a follower of Jesus.
Yeah, but let's step back for a second, because I think that you mentioned a number of things that I think are just good observations. Number one, and I know we're jumping back in history now, but Spanish flu in 1918, you also wouldn't have been able to even see the widespread patterns. Even state to state, if you're on the East Coast, you probably didn't know what was going on the West Coast necessarily, let alone all over Europe. Unless it was a specific article. So I think even just like the way that the internet brings things together, it allows for far more impassioned anger. You're like, look what's happening in California. You know what I mean? Look what they're doing there. Look what they're doing to Christians. Look at what they're doing to, you name the group.
Although I did some research on the 1918 pandemic, and they had some of the same issues. I saw a picture of a baseball player with a mask on. There was a group of churches that got together and willfully closed their doors, and they encouraged people to read sermons in the newspaper and to have their own personal worship services. And then 6 months later, this same group of churches gathered together to petition the government because the government didn't want to let them meet again. And so they felt like now their freedom of worship was being taken away from them. So exactly the same debates, but the difference is not minute by minute breaking news 24 hours a day. They had to get a newspaper, and the newspaper was typically locally focused. And so, yeah, I'm sure that it didn't affect them like it is us today. No doubt.
So now it seems like a lot of social media, mainly Facebook, honestly, right, more than everything else. And especially, I think, just the demographics that are on Facebook as well. But
I get that. I know what you're saying. You're calling us boomers out. I hear that.
Not specifically boomers. There's also a ton of millennials that are on there that just feel way more comfortable expressing their 3,000 word essay of a reaction on there. What I was gonna say is, it's almost like I feel like emojis, like the smiley faces or whatever else, like those little, I don't know why I'm feeling the need to explain emojis, y'all. If you're already on this, you know what emojis are. So there we go. Anyway, but I feel like emojis in some ways have kind of changed even the way people think when they write stuff out, because, like rather than necessarily typing out a reaction, a lot of times you'll just put an emote there. This is how I'm feeling. But I feel like that's kind of caused, this is what I don't know, this is my theory. That I think it's caused us even to be like, because we're so focused on reactions, that we're used to using the blank slate of something like Facebook as opposed to where something happens, it's raw, it costs something in me. And, because I feel justified in whatever I'm about to say, I'm going to express it for the whole world. Come at me, prove me wrong. It's like, that guy at the coffee table who says, blank, something controversial, prove me wrong. It's like everybody's that guy at the table.
Yeah.
Instant reactions.
Yeah, right. And so, now when here's, I guess, a couple of rules for life. Responding out of your emotions typically isn't a good thing. Emotions are good things, but you got to filter them, whether that's in a one-on-one conversation or if you're going to embed it once and forever online, which is something we always forget, that this is a permanent record of our lives that we're putting down there that can never be erased. So you have to be thoughtful about what you say. It's not being reactive is when you just simply be like, okay, this just happened. I haven't had a chance to even research it. I haven't prayed it through, but the whole world needs to hear what I have to say. And then they press the record button and instantly Facebook Live, they are putting out there something that they haven't even processed completely. So that's a part of it is learning that emotional reactions typically aren't a good thing, right? So you have to learn how to process your emotions to handle them healthfully.
That way they're not just raw. I mean, and that was one of the things that was playing around as far as the title, especially for you. Why nobody will almost ever see you post your raw reactions or your raw thoughts, and honestly, I think part of that, especially with your years of experience in ministry, it's probably just learned behavior. I got to be really careful what I say, but I think, around almost everybody, you'll rarely actually share raw thoughts without putting a lot of strategic thoughts and filters and even talking it through with,
Yeah. So, okay. I guess this is also a generational difference. So when I went to the doctors to get the packing out of my nose, the splints out of my nose, I posted on the way and I posted on the way back, and it was a very informal, raw moment. And I was goofing around and my wife was driving the car, and I got a lot of feedback from younger people on Instagram saying, that was really cool. That let me see into your life. So transparency is a good thing on social media. It actually helps us feel closer. And when you're a leader of an organization like I am, and you're trying to connect with people you want to pastor, letting them have glimpses into your life is actually part of the beauty of social media. But taking them into the places that really aren't designed to be shown to the public, right? You need to really think it through first before. So letting people into the non-inflammatory, uh, real moments of your life, I think, is a healthy thing to do. But then when you have things that you could say or share that are inflammatory, that are going to be offensive or hurtful, or may you or your family look bad, or somebody else, that requires you to have some thought behind talking about issues that could be potentially inflammatory. So I think raw is okay in some spaces, but not in others.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a lot of confusion when it comes to the idea of expressing your reactions. I think a lot of people would say, like, not that all reactions are this, but generally when somebody's being reactive, I think they would say taking a stand, or you know, I'm speaking up, or something. And I think, when you see examples like the Apostle Paul in the Bible, who was very confrontational, even just his zero hesitancy to call someone a false teacher, or don't listen to what they're saying, or I think that some people have adopted, like, I need to be like Paul and I need to call out sin, or I need to call out hypocrisy within the church, or whatever. Or you might see Martin Luther King or someone who was confrontational. So I think that maybe something for us to start discussing is we're not saying confrontation is bad. Obviously there are times whenever you were very particular about not saying why I refuse to take a stand. You're like, oh, we take a stand all the time. Of course we take a stand. Okay. But, like, how is taking a stand when needed different from expressing unthought through reactions or thoughts?
Yeah. Okay. That's very good. So now here's a thought. Most things that are difficult or rebuke oriented are better delivered one-on-one, face-to-face.
Mm.
To broadcast a rebuke for a group of people is, whew. So the Apostle Paul had a role. We call him Apostle Paul for a reason. He had a role. He was an apostle. He had established these churches. He had planted them. He had a right to speak into them because he was overseeing them. It's sort of like, you're not going to walk into my house and rebuke my kids. I'm the dad, okay? But as the father, I have the responsibility to deal with my kids if they're not handling themselves well. But not anyone off the street can walk in and just yell at my family. Like, you got to know your space. You have to know your calling. You have to know what your authority is. You have to know why should I be speaking to this issue, right? So I think knowing when you have a place to speak is important, because just ordinary yelling at people. So think about it like this. You wouldn't stand on, some people might, but you wouldn't stand on the street corner and just yell at everybody walking by like that. That would be inappropriate behavior. So you just get online and yell at everybody walking by. That's sometimes how it sort of feels like, wow, like, think about this for a minute. What is your role? What is your position? And what is your objective here? What are you trying?
Or let me even narrow that, because you said yelling at just the general public. If you're posting, sure. What I'm seeing a ton of on both sides is people who feel so justified because they see someone post something who they think is out of line or ignorant or rude or jerk, and they blast them on the comment section. I mean, this is Facebook feels like it's the public debate forum at this point, and it's like, man, I'm sure you've seen this. There are some threads, like even of people I know, where there are like 60 comments back and forth and paragraph, and I can't believe you'd say this, and you know what I mean. Well, who are you to say? So sometimes it's almost like yelling at a specific person in public too. You know, it's not always just like you're on the street corner at like whoever's passing. You know, the world is ending, turn or burn. Sometimes it's like, you know, as if you walk into a coffee shop and you see someone you know, and you're just like,
Yeah. So now, again, let me talk to the Allison Park staff and leaders, because this is the behavior I would want to recommend to you. This is the best practice. So if I see somebody post something, and I've done this a couple times during this pandemic, that I felt like was out of line, okay? I don't respond to them on their public page. I pick up the phone, or I direct message them. And I say, look, what you said I disagreed with, and I think I need to talk to you about this. Can we have a private conversation so that we can resolve this without involving the rest of the world? Because having a public fight, especially with someone else who's a follower of Christ, does nothing to advance the ultimate objective of spreading the gospel.
Yeah.
Because remember, Jesus said, there is one thing that they'll be able to know you by. They'll know you're my followers. They'll know you're Christians because of your love for each other. And so it's like this divisiveness that happens in public. It's nothing wrong with a rebuke. Better is open rebuke than hidden love, the proverb says. But if you're going to rebuke somebody, you should do it privately. Nothing wrong with having discussions, but the public debating. So I think this is what I'm really concerned about. I'm concerned that people who don't know anything about Jesus watch Christians argue with each other and are turned away from the gospel. That young people who watch their parents' behavior online and they see them not being known by their love, but by their politics or their passion for some issue. I'm concerned that young people growing up are going to be turned off to Christ because so if we win the day and we win the argument and we prove that masks are or are not the right thing, or whatever it happens to be that we're battling over, and we do it in a way that doesn't demonstrate Christ-like love, we may win that individual battle and lose the greater war.
Yeah.
Which is that we should be trying to, by the way that we live our lives and the way we talk and the tone that we use, demonstrate what it is to be a follower of Jesus Christ, which is to add value to people and love one another, even people that you disagree with. And so I think there's nothing wrong with having emotion around things. It's just not being reactive so that, again, old-fashioned boomer term, you lose your witness.
Yeah.
That people look at you and they say, man, I've lost a little respect for you now. Like, I heard what you said, and that makes me a little less attracted to your Jesus.
Yeah.
That's my main concern. That people somehow are going to be turned away from Christ because of our behaviors that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and ultimately, I think not only when we're talking about unbelievers, also I think with believers, like, you know, I think we see this model in the New Testament a lot, that confrontation ultimately has to be for restoration purposes. Yeah. You know, where like you have Paul who calls Peter out in front of the apostles, you know, why are you, you know, putting these things on the Gentiles, and, you know, they kind of hash it out. So I think that, like, you know, there is time and a place and a necessity even for confrontation. But you were saying that sometimes you send direct messages or make a phone call to people that you feel like need to, you know, hear some truth in a one-on-one manner. What are some of the principles that you use whenever you're delivering that message?
Yeah. So first is humility. So your tone has to be soft. A gentle answer turns away wrath. Proverbs 15:1. So you're soft, and you're not. You don't come at it angry. Look, I saw that you posted this. You said this. Wow, really not sure that hit me the right way. And I want to give you a chance to explain yourself a little bit, because I want to be able to talk this through with you. And then you listen. This is huge. You listen. Empathy. The key to relational intelligence, the key to the church operating in unity, is that you got to listen, and you got to listen without judgment. And you got to hear what the other person has to say and what they feel. And then you respond. But when you respond, you don't power up. You continue to use soft tones, and you see if you can find common ground and end the conversation in a win-win fashion. so that there is agreement on the other end. Okay, so that's what my hope is that we end up acting that way, trying to create unity. Here's the other challenge. Jesus said that a house divided against itself can't stand. And one of the strategies that the devil has for the people of God is to divide them, because if you're divided, then you've lost already. It doesn't matter which candidate gets elected. It doesn't matter which issue proves to be right. It doesn't matter what, if we end up at the end of this more divided than we were when we went in, it really doesn't matter which side wins, because division is probably the primary problem we have right now.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so
good.
we have to be committed to winning the long-term war. What will this mean for the gospel? How does this reflect on Christ? Will my attitude lead to unity? Will it bring peace? Jesus said in the Beatitudes, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they'll be recognized to be sons of God." So when you are not a peacemaker in the way that you do things on social media, you're recognized to be someone who's inconsistent with being a son of God or a daughter of God, a child of God, a follower of Christ. So this idea of sowing in peace is such a precious thing, because it leads us to unity. Unity doesn't mean uniformity. Unity doesn't mean we agree on everything. The fact of the matter is, no matter what happens over the next couple of months, no matter what happens with the upcoming election, there will be people in whatever church you attend who have a difference of opinion on a lot of the things that you hold strongly. But at the end of the day, you have to walk in unity with them and in love, or else we have lost completely as people of God, as people of faith.
That's a
so
good point.
I think for me, that's the thing I'm thinking of, is not just the individual battle, but the bigger war that we're trying to win, which is to win people to Christ, to love people, to serve them, to add value to their life.
Yeah. So I know you were saying that earlier to me. A lot of this for you is a situation of maybe winning a battle but losing a war.
Right.
So then so some direct questions, I guess. Like, would you ever feel like it would be the right thing to in a comment section, kind of aggressively correct someone who is out of line?
Okay, so I posted on something regarding the 1918 pandemic. I was just trying to bring a little gratitude on Instagram. So I put all these pictures up of people wearing masks. There's one little picture I saw in 1918 of a whole group of people standing wearing masks, and underneath it says, "Wear a mask or go to jail." And I was like, okay, they had the same problems then. So I was just saying, thank God that it's not 1918. There's better health care now. I don't have to depend on people in my church reading my sermons in the newspaper. I can live stream. 670,000 people died in the Spanish flu pandemic in the United States in 1918. There's a lot of people dying right now, but we're not going to hit that death toll. So I was just saying I'm thankful, not like everything's fine, like not saying. And then someone posted something because they perceived me to be saying, you should wear a mask and this is really serious. And so they basically said COVID's a big hoax, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I wrote back strategically. It was on my page. So I had to say something. I couldn't say it privately, or I had to just hide what they said, which I didn't want to do. So I just simply said, I'm not taking a side one way or the other in the argument that you're fighting. I was just trying to be grateful, because when I'm grateful, it makes me feel closer to Jesus. And I put a couple little emojis there. I was trying to diffuse and de-escalate the conversation, not to answer it so that we would then have a comment war back and forth for the next 2 days that other people could join in with. So there is a de-escalation skill that we should all learn, how to take a conversation that's getting heated and de-escalate it, right? And then people will say, yeah, but if I de-escalate, then this issue that I'm fighting for, the point won't get across, and then then the other people are going to win, and we can't let them win because they're trying to take away our rights, or they're being unjust, or whatever it happens to be. And again, this is where we need to have a calm-hearted view of the world, where we take it strategically one step at a time and not emotionally. So
yeah, I was just reading in James yesterday that kind of reminded me of this. I'm going to pull this up. I think it was in James chapter 1, where it says, yeah, so it says, so in James 1:19, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Something that kind of stands out to me as you've been talking is, a concern I would have for a lot of people who are concerned about very valid issues and have very valid emotions about, whatever it might be, injustice or, somebody taking away their rights or whatever. I think my concern would be, it could be dangerous whenever we justify anger over a long period of time. Because first of all, just like it says human anger doesn't produce the righteousness that God desires, but also that can turn to bitterness.
Yep.
So what advice would you give to people who feel justifiably angry, not just about social media, but like, how can you tell if your compass is pointing north? It's not like, obviously there is such a thing as righteous anger, being angry at things that are unjust, and you can name a whole bunch of those. But how do we make sure that we are guarding our heart so that human anger, so that our anger, is not just human anger that does not produce righteousness, as James says?
Yeah. Okay. So the more important the issue, okay, the more deeply you feel that it is righteous, the more important it is that you handle that issue with precision. So if you're going to be an influence for this issue, if you don't handle this with precision, your emotions are under control, your words are well thought out, what's going to happen is you're going to lose influence because of a lack of skill that you have put forward in the way that you've dealt with it. You're going to give the other side of your argument the opportunity to point out the flaws in the way that you handled it. So Jesus actually said, you should be wise as a serpent and innocent as a dove. So you've got to really think through, what is the best way to say this?
Yeah.
Not just the most Jesus way to say it, but what's the most effective? I'm going to say this in a way, I'm not going to try to provoke unnecessarily. I'm not going to show my raw emotions, and I'm not going to lose my mind so that other people who don't think like me are going to be actually repelled because of the emotions I'm expressing. How can I say this in a way that makes people sit back and say, oh, I hadn't thought about that before? You actually want the opponent that you have to actually be forced to think about what you're saying because you're trying to be persuasive. And if you want to win influence, you should actually start your conversation by empathizing with the person that you're arguing with. So a healthy debate, especially if you're going to try to bring people together, is you start with empathy and then you skillfully present what you have to say, not emotionally present it, because it actually will help your issue more if you do it well.
Yeah. So winning influence is more important than winning an argument.
Yes. Perfect. That's a great way to say it. And, another James passage, this is James chapter 3. And I think we all have a recognition. We have like a radar built into us that recognizes this. This is not the wisdom that comes from above, it says. Let me go back. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show in his works of meekness or preference for others and wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, don't boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes from above. I love this. You can see wisdom is the opposite of these things. Lack of wisdom is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. Where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every evil practice.
Yeah.
But the wisdom that comes from above is pure and peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who practice it. So there's a certain tone to it. There's an attitude to wisdom. And people recognize that when they see it. I didn't do the great job of reading through that, but there's a good passage to look up.
Yeah, your translation was a little confusing. My 18 says, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness, which is, I love that. I think it's just, I know this is a really delicate issue, but I think it's important to say that like anger and shame can't be a long-term strategy for change. As we're trying to be conformed to the image of Christ, using anger as a weapon or shame as a weapon, really does not produce godly change or lasting change in the kind of way that we want. So I think, everything you've been saying is so appropriate. James is actually a really great book for us to be reading through right now, because there are so many applicable things throughout it that feel like they direct right to the tension that we're at.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Let me go back
good.
to the verse you quoted, because I think this is important. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness, or another word, justice, which is what our goal is. It's unjust that it's this way. We want to see justice happen. This is not right. We want righteousness to come in this situation. But peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of justice. If you sow in something other than peace, you'll just reap disorder and every evil practice. That's what James says. You end up with all kinds of chaos. So if you're not sowing what you need to sow in your taking a stand in peace, you're just going to reap disorder. But if you sow in peace, you reap justice. And this is what we're after. So it's not like we only want peace. We want peace and justice, but there's a pathway to that is a very clearly spelled out pathway through the examples that Jesus gives.
Yeah, I think like the emotion might be that I don't owe this offender, I don't owe this group peace. You know what I mean? Once they make it up or they restore it, then they'll get peace. But we don't pursue peace for the offenders. Our goal is to pursue peace because it honors God. And
Sure.
that he was willing to make peace with us before we ever deserved it. And I think that if we are, I guess ultimately, if your priority is following Jesus above everything else, then it's not that we don't confront, but it's that ultimately confrontation has to be for the sake of peace in the long run.
That's a very big question you just asked there. I heard Andy Stanley do some great talks on politics, and he asked this question in his talks: is your faith filter ahead of everything else? Are you a Christian first?
Wow. Yeah.
Before you're a man or a woman, before you're white or black, before you are Republican or Democrat, before you're masked or non-masked, before whatever the issue is for you, right? Okay. Are you a Christian first? And then second, it doesn't nullify that you're the other, right? So it's very important that you're all the other things too. That's okay, right? It's a part of who you are. It doesn't deny race. It doesn't deny political affiliation. It doesn't deny your issue, but it means that following Jesus is your first thing. And then that filters how you do everything else. And my fear is, as I'm watching people respond the way that they're responding on social media, is that some people are Republican first and Christian second.
Yeah.
Right. Or they're this issue first, and then they're religious freedom first, and then Christianity second. Right. It's whatever it happens to be, Democrat first, and then I'm a Christian. For me, I have already settled this in my mind. I love the United States of America, but America is not my number one love. Jesus is. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like, I'm a follower of Jesus even before I'm an American.
Yeah.
Okay. So like, I love the fact that I'm a citizen of this country, but I do not, it's not even really even close for me.
Yeah.
Like, following Jesus is so far beyond my adherence to my country. And I'm in no way trying to be disloyal to my nation. I'm just simply saying that's where it starts for me. And I think especially if you're a spiritual leader in you're Christian, you have to really think about this. Like, how do I follow Jesus first? And how does my Jesus-ness, affect everything else?
Forget about if you're a spiritual leader. If you want to be a follower of Jesus in general, because then your goal is to be transformed into the image of Christ. So I think you're right. And man, on every side, this is not because there's so much of this. I really think the question is, are anger, chaos, shame tools that Jesus wants to use for justice? I don't think at all. I think that there's valid reactions for some of those things. But in a world, in a society where people, where you can easily justify the reason for that reaction. Ultimately, I think what you just said is so appropriate. Am I a Christian first? before whatever else.
No, Jesus, you say, but Jesus rebuked the Pharisees. He did. He did rebuke them, but often he didn't start those battles. He answered questions back and forth because he was put on the spot. It wasn't like he woke up every day seeking out Pharisees to blow up, right?
Yeah.
He went around and he healed the sick, and he would enter a synagogue and he would heal somebody sick in the synagogue, and some self-righteous religious leader would provoke him and he would answer. But most often when he answered, he didn't answer by calling them out. He would ask a question and then they would react and then he would respond. But, okay, so there was truth that was spoken, but it was always done strategically. And you have this moment where Jesus goes to the temple and he turns over the tables. And I think we may have said this on a previous podcast, even how one of the Gospels records that after Jesus turned the temples over and says, "My house will be called a house of prayer for all people," immediately the blind and the lame came to him to be healed. So he must have done it with such a compassionate tone that the people around him felt like, that's a guy I can find hope in. So it's not like he blew the temple up and he turned the tables over and everybody was like, stay away from that guy, he's lost his mind. The moment he does it, those who are broken and hurting were drawn to him to receive ministry. So if after you post, you find people are direct messaging you saying, wow, there's something in you that's attractive to me, I need you to pray healing onto my life, then you're probably doing something right, because that was the style in which Jesus turned the tables over. It was not done in vengeance
or in a hunt. He wasn't going to snipe Pharisees, you know what I mean? Where he's like, well, they're in the middle of lunch. He's like, hold on, I heard, from this person that you told this to that beggar over there,
right.
Because he could have done that. I'm sure he could have. He was always more righteous than everybody, but he wasn't like argument hunting, or blasting stuff out like, prove me wrong, Pharisees. Hey, yeah. Okay.
He wasn't a troll, right?
He wasn't a troll. Yeah. And I can understand why someone would feel like they're a righteous kind of a troll, but I don't think that that's ultimately the image of Jesus. If we can.
Yeah. And when we go back to the Apostle Paul, when Paul called out things, because he did, typically the result of Paul's moments like that involved the salvation of hundreds of people and the planting of a church. Mm. So I would just say, Jesus said, by your fruits you'll know them. If your rants on your expressions are drawing hundreds of people to Jesus and new works are being birthed because of your forceful rebuke in the Holy Spirit, then I would say maybe we should step back and look at what you're doing, because something you're doing is right. But if all you're doing is just starting fights and there isn't anyone that's coming to Christ through it, then I would have to say, step back for a minute. I'm sorry, and let me be pastoral. I love you. Okay. I'm telling you this now. I love you. Reconsider your tone. Think about what you're doing. Don't just be reactive. Power down for a minute. Get some coaching. Before you post, show it to somebody. You say, do you think this reflects well? Like, is this a good strategic thing to do? Because I think we're all better than this. And at the end of the day, I think we can't let the devil win by dividing us. We have to learn how to walk in love together with brothers and sisters that don't agree with us on issues, that aren't from the same political party, that think differently about the COVID crisis. And we need to be able to, in complete openness and transparency, stand arm in arm with one another in love, because we're all followers of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So I guess to summarize a lot of what you've said, winning an argument might feel like a win, but really influence is the real war we're trying to win.
Sure. Yeah.
Less so correction, more so winning people to Jesus.
Yeah.
So do you have any closing thoughts before we end?
Yeah, this has been just a terrible time to live, honestly. It's been so challenging, but it's such an opportunity. If we could turn our tone around and we could start to operate with a little more wisdom, and we could come together with people we disagree with, I actually think this is a chance for the church to shine. In so many ways, the church is shining in food distribution and in acts of service. We're able to come together on those things. But when it comes to other things, somehow we're letting this divide us. If we can learn how to come together and calm ourselves down and have conversations in the proper way, I think that this is an opportunity for us to represent Jesus in the world at a time when the world so desperately needs that.
Wow, yeah. That's good. Yeah. Well, regardless as to your situation or what you're going through, I hope you've heard our heart in this out of love and not out of rebuke for you, because ultimately, we just want your best. So, as always, thanks for joining us for the Allison Park Leadership Podcast. Hopefully our next hiatus won't be so long as this last one. In a couple weeks, we'll be back with you. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. As always, please share this with your friends on social media, or as the podcast, you can find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, Facebook, wherever. So yeah, have a great day. We'll catch you soon.